Bob, I've got something to show you.
Oh yeah, what? Right, so I want revenge, and what better way than to shoot her from across the world? Because obviously that's the next logical step. With a Nerf dart, of course. Not a bullet. Now, let's see if that's possible. Obviously, a Nerf dart isn't that aerodynamic, so let's make it pointier. And as a wise general once said,
It is too round on the top, it needs to be pointy. Round is not scary, pointy is scary.
it's also extremely light and got very low inertia, so let's make it out of tungsten too. Ladies and gentlemen, would you look at that? We now have a Nerf dart that is more suitable for orbital flight. The model shown on the screen is using the G7 model. The G7 model is essentially a standardized design of the low drag bullet, which is based on the caliber, i.e. diameter, of the bullet. It will be clear why it is useful later. The reason for these assumptions is that it makes it easier to model the bullet without accounting for tiny forces that have a negligible but expensive effect on it. For example, making the Earth an uneven surface will have very little effect. Now that's out the way, let's make a free body diagram. It's actually quite simple, it's just drag and weight. The first force we have is gravity. And since distance also changes with height over the ground, we can also add that into the formula. Now, let's handle drag. Drag is based on the air density, which decreases exponentially with altitude, and we will sample it from a table given by NASA in the 1970s. Next is the cross-sectional area, so just a circle in our case. Then, the drag coefficient, which is usually calculated by measuring the drag force and rearranging the equation, but in our case, I can't do that myself because that's kind of illegal, and since we already intend to go very fast, in the second edition of hypersonic and high temperatures gas dynamics, the faster you go, the more the drag coefficient levels off. And, if you observe here, there is a big rise during the transonic region. Taking these into account along with the data, I managed to estimate a function in Desmos. This is also why we use the G7 model. The drag coefficients are the same no matter the size. This is called the ballistic coefficient. We now get the resultant force as the equation shown on screen. Now look, we can find the height in terms of position. Velocity is just a derivative of position, and acceleration is just a derivative of velocity, both with respect to time. Substituting these back in, we get this horrendous equation, but it shows that it's an ordinary differential equation with respect to position and time. So sadly, there isn't a closed form solution in this case. But before we do anything else, we can't forget the math. Let's find the volume first. We can express the radius of the bullet with a function, which is derived from the G7 model dimensions. We can rotate around the x-axis to find a volume using this integral, which essentially sums together very thin cylinders. Plugging this in, and at a whopping 19.3 grams per cubic centimeter, we get a mass of around 0.6396 kilos. Let's look into integrators. They can solve differential equations numerically. By taking small steps in time, they can approximate the solution. The most basic one is Euler integration. It updates the velocity with the acceleration function, then updates position with the velocity. This is bad as it injects energy into the system, as it constantly overshoots, and then the errors add up as this is a recursive formula. Semi-implicit Euler, or symplectic integration, is the same as Euler integration, but you use the new velocity to calculate the position instead of the old velocity. As you can see, it creates much more accurate results, but still isn't great. Verlet integration is also a symplectic integration style, but you don't need to use velocity. It updates position directly using the acceleration, and both current and past positions. It performs almost identical to the semi-implicit Euler. Runge-Kutta 4 is a completely different integration technique. It computes the weighted average of 4 different gradients, hence the name Runge-Kutta 4, which are 1 at the start, 2 at the middle, and 1 at the end, which are K1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. These work so well as they appreciate that acceleration isn't linear between time steps and account for it, unlike Euler or symplectic integration. They create extremely accurate results, and it's the method I'll be using. Also, NASA frequently uses this method too. So, I use Python to make the simulation and analysis, using NumPy and Pandas libraries to deal with the math and storage in CSV files. Most of these animations were also made in Python using Manum, a library made by 3blue1brown. Finally, the graphs shown are rendered with a matplotlib library. First, I did a large sample of what trajectories would look like with initial velocities ranging from 8 to 15 km a second and a launch angle of 0 to 30 degrees. Zooming in, we can see that smaller angles and lower speeds are more preferable. This test batch has a smaller variation, and it seems that the launch angle matters more than the initial speed. To test this theory, I made it such that they all start at 10 km a second, but I only changed the launch angles ranging from 0 to 30. You might not be able to see clearly, but it seems that a launch angle of 0 has the best chance of making it around the world. This one had hand-picked starting conditions, and it was the best shot I could do, with it landing just 2.3 kilometers away from the starting point. But if I were to let it go through the Earth, it would have just landed 50 centimeters below the starting point. So this is the best run I would use. I added some code so we can finally analyze the flight path. We got to 20,000 kilometers away, and the entire flight took 550 hours or 23 days. And, as we already know, you are the slowest when you're the furthest away, but it's nice to see that shown clearly on the graph. Also, the acceleration graph has a very interesting shape that I didn't expect. So, I think it's safe to say that we can shoot someone from across the world with a Nerf dart. Bob would say so too, because he already knew that.